Hello, everyone. Welcome to Scientology Laugh. Scientology Laugh. That's what we're going to do today. Welcome to Scientology Life After a Cult. I'm Natalie Webster. Welcome back. If you've been here before and if you're new to the channel, hello. Welcome. Hello, everybody in the chat. Fabulous to see you there. And Mela Kalikimaka, 'tis the season, right? It is that holiday weekend. I'm getting a little bit more into it. I hadn't been because I live in the Midwest and we normally have snow and there's no snow, which I'm not missing the snow aside from it being the holidays, and it always makes it kind of cool. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Be sure to check your subscribe button if you've subscribed before. Make sure you're still subscribed. And if you haven't yet, please hit the subscribe button today. I'm excited about this, although I'm excited about everything. We're going to talk about why Scientologist Tom Cruise thinks he's better than everyone and get further into that and how that relates to Scientology as a whole. This is something that I've been thinking a lot about lately, not just recently, like in the last few days, but I mean, even in the last couple of years, as the further I've gotten out into the world and interact with people who have never been in Scientology, as I've been doing really for the last decade, but way, 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 way more in the last couple of years, just by nature of what I do for a living now, working in real estate. It's just, I deal with so many more different people and I absolutely love it. And I've had a lot of realizations about this because I am not saying that every Scientologist is this way, because I don't think that every Catholic is the same way or every Baptist is the same way. So this does not apply to all Scientologists, but this is I would say it's a common attitude and a common issue that people run into with Scientologists. And Tom Cruise is the best example of this, and you're going to see why. Now, everybody's familiar with Tom Cruise. We've gone through the couch jumping. We've gone through all these things. We've gone through his period of where he was really, going off on Mount Lauer, Brook Shield, jump, just the whole thing. And then he kind of quieted down about Scientology, and then he'd rear his head up about it again. And a lot of the comments and discussion and conversation around that was, it's so, he's so condescending. There's this attitude of that he's better than everyone, even amongst Scientologists. I don't mean in the way that, though I think many Scientologists secretly think this, but they won't dare voice it. And I know this because I thought it when I was a Scientologist. If you're new to my channel, I grew up in Scientology, spent 35 years in the cult, and got out over a decade, about almost 13 years ago now, with 3 generations of my family. And I share my story and experiences, theirs as well. And sometimes they join me. And I really want to bring the understanding of the Scientology mindset to a lot of these things that we talk about, that the different SBTV creators talk about as well, because I feel that it helps. The more we understand the mindset, I think the more we can help people that are in Scientology and want to leave, as well as helping people to understand why they shouldn't start in the first place. Yes. So this is going to be really interesting. At least I find it super interesting and fascinating because I look back on my old mindset and kind of check with myself and go, oh my gosh, did I think that? And there were times when I did, and this will make sense as we go on. It's not uncommon for Scientologists and obviously Tom Cruise to have a superiority complex. It's not uncommon. It's definitely common, but it's not every single person. And I was checking this out on WebMD, okay, what is a superiority complex exactly? And WebMD said that a superiority complex is a belief that your abilities or accomplishments are somehow dramatically better than other people's. And this is something that's common in Scientology. The way that Scientologists, in my experience, would view non-Scientologists, people outside of Scientology, and frankly, even people in Scientology, which I always thought was interesting, especially more so after I left. Um, WebMD also says that people with a superiority complex may be condescending, smug, or mean to other people who don't agree with them. And why this is really interesting to me is your girl here has been called condescending a few times. Not recently, and in a even in a professional setting, and I think I know why. It's never when I'm talking to the person and I'm in front of them. It was a couple of times in a written communication where it was an email, and one time it was a super short email, so I was really surprised to hear that comment. But one thing I try to take a look, especially if I hear it more than one time. If it's just like one comment out of 1,000 people that, see it differently, then okay, maybe it's them and not me. But if it's something that I hear, I want to look and go, oh my gosh, is that something that I'm doing, that I'm coming across, that I'm being perceived that way, or my communication is? And is there something I can do to remedy that, especially when that's not my intention? I've had moments where I intentionally was being condescending. And these times that I'm thinking of, that wasn't it. I wasn't trying to be condescending, and I was perplexed why it came across that way. And the more I put these things in context, my experience in Scientology, my indoctrination, looking at other Scientologists like Tom Cruise and other people, and understanding how people who are never in Scientology see that and perceive that. I think I've figured it out. For me, in my situation of in a couple of emails coming across that way, it's because but never in person. That's why I was like, I don't get it. And it's because in person, it's more, I think you can see me and see, my emotions, and it's harder to read into something when you got the person right in front of you. Whereas if you get an email or a text message, the receiver can read in emotions, meanings, all kinds of things that just aren't there. You can do that obviously with people face to face, but I don't think that it's as common to do that as people do in text or in an email. So sometimes in my emails, I would come across that way, and it was because in my emails, in my written communication, I would just communicate very factually. I had no feelings or upset or emotion about it. I was just, oh, blah blah blah, blah blah blah. It was just too direct. And I wasn't thinking about how that could be perceived, because even though in person I've learned that sometimes I need to read the room and not be as direct as is my nature to be sometimes. And sometimes it's perfectly okay. And sometimes I get it right. And sometimes I still get it wrong, and I misread the person and still a little bit too direct. But that's something that I think I'll continuously work on and hopefully get better at. But if not, to be honest, I've come so far that I'm pretty happy with the way it is now. I just want to improve this thing in my written communication. But my point is that very being so direct without any, in a robotic way, lacks feeling and emotion, and it lacks that wavelength of energy, if that makes sense. And so there's no connection. It feels weird. But when you add in more, what I used to think of as filler words like, please and thank you. When you add that more in, and you use words to communicate what you're feeling, then it's more clear to people. And I think this is why I was having the occasional issue. It wasn't a big thing where in an email that I would come across that way. And the more I thought about this, and the more I've been revisiting a lot of things that I'd already, seen about Scientology. For example, some of the things that Tom Cruise was doing. And because it's been coming up in conversation, I've kind of re-gone and looked up some of the things that he said, and re-looked at some of his videos and been thinking to myself, like, okay, this is kind of making more sense. Like, why, why is this? Why is it that Tom Cruise and sometimes other Scientologists come off like they think they know better than everybody? And if you look at a couple of things that Tom Cruise has said, I think it gives a very good example. And much of these things that he said really resonated with Scientologists. And I know because I was there in the room. Well, I was watching it on the screen. I wasn't physically in the room when he got his Freedom Medal of Valor from David Miscavige. But you've all seen the video. You've all seen it. But when I saw it, it was towards, it was definitely more when I was just starting to question more about Scientology. And even then it was a little like, well, that just sounds so like you have a superiority complex. But here's some of the things that he said. Okay, so, and this is a quote, what Tom Cruise said. It's a privilege to call yourself a Scientologist, and it's something you have to earn. That is something that went over very well at the event that I was at when he said that with the Scientologists that were all around there. And yes, Napoleon complex is a great way of saying it. And if you look at that, it's a privilege to call yourself a Scientologist, and it's something you have to earn. First thing I think is, okay, it's a privilege to call yourself, I think, many things. Like I would think, I feel in a way that it's a privilege to call myself a mom because not everybody gets to experience that. But almost anyone can become a Scientologist. So I wasn't totally tracking with him there. It's something that you have to earn. And I think really it's more about the sense of I sometimes I look at things through a marketing lens because of my work. And when I look at that, it's a privilege to call yourself a Scientologist, and it's something that you have to earn. In the Scientology community, what that means is all the crap that they've been putting up with, the constant demands for money, the taking of their children, that you're earning this privilege that goes along with being a Scientologist. So it justifies some of those abuses, the financial abuses even that occur so regularly with Scientologists. And when he said that, I think that's really why it resonated, because it was an opportunity for Scientologists to go, okay, so I've suffered. I've paid money that I did not have. I racked up credit cards. I cashed in my kids' college fund, all $50 that was in there or more. I actually know people who did have good college funds, and they went to Scientology. But you kind of get the point. There's this idea that you have suffered and you have earned this right to be a Scientologist. And I think that's why it resonated with them. And I also think it's part of how, when we talk about why do people stay in Scientology when these things happen? Well, you have people like Tom Cruise telling you it's a privilege to call yourself a Scientologist, and it's something you have to earn. You see, I just think that those things together made so much sense for me in how they would think that and come across that way. You're paying all of this money, you're earning it, you're putting up with all kinds of BS, you're earning it. But what you're earning is this privilege because Tom Cruise said it was. This is why L. Ron Hubbard created the Celebrity Center, to recruit celebrities to be thought leaders, or in Scientology, they refer to them as opinion leaders on Scientology, to then go out and encourage the masses to join Scientology and get on the bridge to total freedom. I think that's all it's totally what it's about. So Tom Cruise also said, and this was said, I think this was from his, when he got the medal. I think it definitely was. So it was two Scientologists. We're the authorities on getting people off drugs. We're the authorities on the mind. We're the authorities on improving conditions. I mean, just unpack that one, right? So now here you are, you're sitting in there, you're exhausted and broke, and there's so much stress on your family because of the money stuff, and you don't see your children or your spouse because you're in the course room all the time. And I'm talking about Scientology parishioners here. I am not even talking about staff members who, put in all of this time for no money on top of all of those things, and see organization members for sure, where it's even you're 24/7. You've committed 1 billion years to this. And here is, Tom Cruise is validating that we are the authorities on getting people off drugs. We are the authorities on the mind. We are the authorities on improving conditions. It goes right back to validating. And that's why I think this is really honestly why I think Tom Cruise really got that medal from David Miscavige, because he had just been brought back into the fold, which you might already know. Some people don't. Tom Cruise was not active in Scientology for, I think it was like a 10-year period. And then when he was gotten back and gotten going again and all that is when, he split up with Nicole Kidman, who, big surprise in his eyes in the church, was a suppressive person. How great would it be if she one day, I mean, I doubt she'd do this, but, joined SPTV and could speak freely, but that's never going to happen. My understanding is neither she nor Katie will be speaking of certain things anytime soon, just because of agreements that they had to make to get rid of him. That's how I look at it. But that idea that, we know everything. We know we control, we're getting people off drugs. We're the authorities on the mind. We're doing these things. We're improving conditions. And then Scientologists are shown these videos of people out in different places, getting out Way to Happiness booklets, working as volunteer ministers. But when they're doing these things, they're not out there providing the help that's needed. If you go to, there's a hurricane and you show up, what do people need? They need food, they need shelter, they need water, they need safety, they need security, they need their basic needs met. What they don't need is a copy of The Way to Happiness. But this is often what these front groups for Scientology would do, The Way to Crappiness. Cornelius, you are on fire today. I just keep catching your comments out of the corner of my eye. But you kind of get the point. You guys tracking with me? It's just it feeds into that ego. And then that is what kind of like feeds this idea that you're so much better. And then it justifies, of course, I need to struggle financially because I'm doing something here. It just justifies all of that, I think, in the mind of many Scientologists. Because in my experience, the more that I realized, like for myself, when I was in Scientology and waking up from it, part of that waking up process was shedding that idea that I was the authority on anything. I mean, really anything, let alone drugs, the mind, helping other people, things like that. It's letting go of that. I never was like all in on it, that yes, I would think at times that, when I was like in my really more dedicated frame of mind in Scientology, that people in Scientology were dedicated and doing really great things. Not so much me, but they were. And because that's what you're told and that's what you're shown in these videos. When you go to these mandatory events in Scientology, they really make it look like this is happening. And I've since spoken to people who were involved in some of these, and it's on the internet too. They've come out and said, "Oh, we staged that. We made it look that way, but we really weren't doing that. We really weren't helping anyone." They weren't going out there and grabbing footage of people really helping. They were reenacting the whole thing or making it up completely. But again, because that ego as a Scientologist needs to be fed. so that you want to continue, so that you're able to continue your struggle and give this money because it's for these amazing things, because you are the only one who can help mankind. And you see that in Tom Cruise's behavior often when he's speaking about these things, Scientology, judging Brooke Shields, things like that. Another thing that he said, and this kind of goes back to, what I was talking about, what a superiority complex is, and how part of that is, so it can be, right, people with a superiority complex may be condescending, smug, or mean to other people who don't agree with them, or mean to other people who do not agree with them. And one of my other favorite Tom Cruise quotes was when he said, and I think this was to Rolling Stone magazine, and this is a quote, "Some people, well, if they don't like Scientology, well, then F you. Really? F you. Period." um, I mean, you see, that is exactly that. This looking down upon because you don't agree with me. We can disagree. We can not agree on the same things. There doesn't need to be this hate about it, right? It's like, I'm not going to come down on you because I love chocolate and you do not. It just doesn't need to. Why does it have to be this black and white thinking? And so much of this in Scientology, it leads to black and white thinking, which is where things get all gummed up the way that I see it. So another thing he said, and I think this is when he got his medal, was being a Scientologist, when you drive past an accident, it's not like anyone else. You drive past, you have to do something about it. You are the only one who can help. You're the only one who can really help. That's what drives me. And that's Tom Cruise speaking. And again, it's that whole thing of, well, we are the only ones. This is the only way. And that is where Scientology really starts to take that. They take it to such an extreme, because there are other religions that believe that their beliefs are the only way to enter heaven, to have a relationship with God, to worship through Jesus. People have their beliefs, and they're different. But the difference with most is it's not the way in Scientology where, let me put it this way. I'm sure there's someone out there who's done this. The way that Tom Cruise said, and if you don't like it, then F you. If you don't like that I'm a Scientologist, then F you. I've not had any interaction with somebody said, well, if you don't like that I'm a Catholic, then F you. There's these differences, and I know I don't need to explain the differences to you, because you guys know more than anybody what, how this is so not true, the information that's fed to Scientologists and the belief, and how it just backfires. Because outside of Scientology, there are more people that don't think that way, that don't have those same beliefs. So are you going to be at conflict then with pretty much everybody? And we all know the answer to that. Yes, they are. Scientology is going to be in conflict with almost everybody. They're so good at creating enemies because that is the mentality. Tom Cruise said this to Rolling Stone magazine. I forget the year, but I want to say it was before 2010. I could be wrong about that. I should have written it down, but you get the point. The mindset for a Scientologist in Scientology, there's no forgiveness, there's no acceptance, grace, empathy. These are things that I learned afterwards and that have been modeled by me, and it's modeled by many of you. That's not something that is nurtured or encouraged in Scientology. It's quite the opposite. That's the interesting thing about it. So think about it. Because sometimes the behavior of Scientologists, especially on Scientology Audit, on his channel, I was just watching it again. I've become obsessed. I just can't look at it the same with the people who were in the videos, the Scientologists, and that blank stare with some of them. I saw a couple of the girls, they were like laughing and brushing off what was being said to them. But that look of just, I am just going to be here and I'm going to confront you and I'm going to face you and I'm going to shatter your suppression with my creepy eyes, but not communicate, not communicate. How different might it be if it was like, if someone walked up and was maybe, like saying, hey, this is a cult. And we're like, oh, well, tell me more about that. Tell me where, you got this information. Not where did you get this information? For one, they would never question you. But, if you were open to the idea, like, okay, that's interesting, where you were more curious about it, if you're a Scientologist, if you were allowed to be curious about why someone thinks Scientology is a cult, honestly, I think it would be such a different situation for Scientologists. But you're not allowed to be curious. So you're not allowed, because it's part of the mind control. It's part of the thought control. So you're not allowed to hear some of these things. And Kelly, yes, North Korean POW, 100%. You're not allowed to question. So you're indoctrinated to just be there with your creepy eyes and your shattering suppression. But you're not allowed to let your mind go, I wonder why they're saying that. It's just you immediately push up against it. And part of that is human nature. Most of it is complete in the nurturing of that in Scientology. It's kind of human nature. If I come at you with something like, hey, da da da, you're going to respond negatively. Your initial reaction might not be one of curiosity. But if you were allowed, if we can take a step back from things sometimes, and this is something that I try to do and I don't always do it. It's something I'm working on because I think it makes so much sense. When you take that step back and allow yourself to question it, and maybe this is just a me thing or a cult thing, I really don't know. But when I was in Scientology and when I was in that mindset, I didn't allow myself to take a step back and question it, not be threatened by it. Okay, why do you think that? What happened? And this is something I learned after leaving Scientology, was that it's okay to ask questions, to understand something. Somebody might say something and I don't agree with it. That's okay. It doesn't mean that what they're saying is wrong or that what I'm saying is wrong. It's just a different way of looking at it. I'm looking at it from over here and from where I come from. They're looking at it from over there and from where they came from. There's not one. There's not one. And that's my big, I've talked about this in leaving Scientology and getting away from that, is recognizing that. And that is what's missing with Tom Cruise and Scientologists like him. Not all Scientologists. The ones who are less like that, I believe, are more likely to leave because you can admit you're wrong. But if you believe you are mankind's only salvation and the only people who can help people are Scientologists, are Tom Cruise and an army of Scientologists, how can you admit that you were wrong, or that L. Ron Hubbard was wrong, or that what you're doing might be wrong? You wouldn't question it because you're just all in on it. You're like, I'm here every day, all day for the Tom Cruise level commitment to Scientology and the black and white thinking, because I can't question things. If they were allowed to question it and think, I just think it would be a game changer. And sometimes I think it can take a while for people who've left Scientology to realize that you don't need to have black and white thinking. And black and white thinking is not something specific to Scientology and even cults. It's other people do it too. Other people do it too. Not just a cult thing. But you get the point. It's amplified though. It's nurtured. That is nurtured in Scientology, to not be curious because you don't want to be asking questions. That's why you're not allowed to read things against Scientology. But they don't stop there, my friends. I remember when I was in the Sea organization, they had a list of banned books. And what was on there? What's that one book? The Secret was on there. No, that was later. That was later. When I was a Scientologist going back for services, I found out that the book, The Secret, you weren't allowed to read. At some point they banned it. And there were some other ones too. It was outright hilarious because you can't have competition for Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard can't be wrong. So it just reinforces more the mindset. And some of this, you guys, as I'm, going through it and figuring it out, and as I'm sharing it with you, it's like some of these things I only recently really started to make sense to me. And I've been able to give it more of a context, especially going back and looking at some of these things. When I talk about in Scientology, they don't foster forgiveness or acceptance or giving grace to people, no empathy. What they will do. So let's say you do something, let's say, oh gosh, there's so many things you can get in trouble for in Scientology that it's hard to nail down one that maybe wouldn't be too crazy. You don't lock a door that's supposed to be locked, and you are now just treasonous. In Scientology, there are these things called the condition formulas. And each one you can be assigned, or you yourself can decide that that's where you're at. And it's things like the one we're going to focus on is liability. So which kind of speaks for itself, right? Liability. You're a liability. You're a liability to Scientology. Cornelius says they even banned karma, the book Karma or the concept, because there's a book called Karma, which I read and absolutely love. So I'm real curious if it's the same one. Lost my train of thought. I got to stop looking at the chat when I'm Cornelius keeps distracting me. Liability. In Scientology, there is this condition called liability. You can decide you are a liability, or most commonly, you tell someone else they're a liability or that they are in the condition of liability because you are a liability. So you do something, you don't lock a door. It's a betrayal to the group. People are just pissed at you. And I know it sounds stupid, but this is totally a thing. So you're on the crap list, right? But you want to get back into the good graces. So what do you have to do to get back into the good graces as a Scientologist, right? Because here you are, you're better than everybody else outside of Scientology, and you're better than many of your fellow Scientologists. But now I've done something, I didn't lock a door, I got in trouble. How do I get back into the good graces? There are steps that you follow in Scientology when you are assigned, or you're told you are in the condition of liability. And there are different conditions too. There's some that are good, like, oh, you're in the condition of normal. And then L. Ron Hubbard says, when you're in this condition, these are the things that you should do. When you're in this condition, these are the things that you should do. So whether it's a more positive, desirable condition or you're a piece of crap condition, L. Ron Hubbard came up with steps, the exact things that you do so that you can improve your condition. So you don't do something in Scientology that the group is offended by and gets pissed off about and have them just go, you know what? It's all right. Let's forget about it. Sometimes when we get worked up about things, we each say things that we don't mean. And at the end of the day, you know what? I love you. You're my group member, blah, blah, blah. No, that is something that's practiced in outside of Scientology. I have seen it. I have seen it. And thankfully, I have experienced it. And I have been on the receiving end of it and was like, well, wait a minute. I don't have to do this giant amends project for you. You don't want to tell me I'm just such a piece of crap. And I think that even people outside of Scientology, you guys tell me in the chat or in the comments, no one beats ourselves up more than us. I think if you're a well-intentioned person, there's nothing someone can do to us that we wouldn't think worse of ourselves because it's something that we did that we felt bad about. And the most beautiful gift in my mind, or one of the most beautiful gifts, I think, is grace and forgiveness. because when you really mean it, you're letting go. And that person, they don't need to carry that. They don't need to hold on to that, because in most situations, the person means well, but whatever happened that they did, whatever they did, it's we all mess up. Now I'm talking outside of Scientology, okay? There's no grace and things like that within Scientology. But what you can do is you can do what's called a condition of liability. Because remember, there are these different conditions in Scientology, and each one, L. Ron Hubbard dictates the exact steps that you need to do to get back in the good graces. So rather than, like I try, like let's say somebody's late, you're meeting them for dinner. This isn't why you would get assigned a condition in Scientology, but if you were late for course or something like that, yeah, you could. But you usually okay, they're 10 minutes, even if they're 15 minutes late, which that's that's a push. You still want to be great, be like, hey, you know what, it's all right, da, 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 da. Now, if it really wasn't all right, then okay, it wasn't all right. But, if I can, and if it really was fine, because I got to get caught up on some stuff on my phone while I was waiting or whatever, if it doesn't throw my entire day, I'm letting it go. I'm not going to hold that person's feet to the fire because they were late when it had no impact on me and actually kind of made things a little better for me because I got to take care of some work on my phone while I was waiting for you to show up. It's you gotta have that flexibility, I think. So in Scientology, I cannot wait to hear. Some of you already know this condition of liability. The first step is you have to decide who your friends are. Decide who your friends really are. Because by not locking that door, let's use that example, you're obviously pretending to be friends with people who don't lock doors. And if anything in Scientology, we are lockers of doors. And sidebar, seriously, I still am. I'm like massively obsessed. When Tony does join us, I'm sure he will tell you. I'm always like, did you lock the garage door? Did you lock the front door? Did you lock the back door? It's next level. So yeah, it's you got to decide who your friends are. Who are your friends really? Are these non-door locking people, or is it the door locking Scientologists that never forget to lock a door? And this is kind of where that superiority complex comes in again too. We don't ever forget to lock doors because we are the most ethical group on the planet and blah, 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 blah. When you see that behavior over and over again, and that is the way that you're communicated to, I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to mimic it, right? It's like, and especially with the children growing up in this, you have parents who are doing it because your parents, like I was a second generation Scientologist, unless you count my grandpa. Well, we won't get into that, but yeah, second generation. My mom, my biological mom got into Scientology. I got into Scientology. And then third generation was my kids. So you need to figure out okay, who's your friend? Who really are your friends? I was starting to go off on a tangent, but I'm going to bring it back here. The next thing you need to do is you need to deliver an effective blow. So some kind of action, you need to take action and not just, some wussy pretend action. You need to take actual action against who, you ask? Against the enemies of the group that you have been pretending to be a part of. So like say the group of people who don't lock doors. You need to deliver a blow against them because they don't lock doors. We are door lockers. We never forget to lock doors. We lock doors. We are the most ethical group on the planet. But those other people who don't lock doors, you need to deliver an effective blow to them. You need to do something against them. And there's a second part to this, despite any personal danger in doing so. And I'm paraphrasing here. These are not exact quotes out of the Scientology ethics book. So right now I'm doing what Scientology would call me is a squirrel. I'm verbally giving you this information. I have notes about it, but I don't have any of my books anymore. If somebody knows in the chat, is there a place online where you can, other than Googling it, get access to Scientology policies and whatnot, including In the C organization, there's a whole separate set of policies only for the C org called flag orders. Is there some place where it's already all on the internet and people can read it? I am curious about that. So if you do know, let me know in the chat or the comments. I would greatly appreciate it. So you got to look at this group of people who don't lock doors and you got to be like, okay, what can I do that is an effective blow against that? I'm going to buy 20 new locks and I'm going to give them to Scientologists around me because screw you, you non-door lockers. And, and I remember this, like if there wasn't that part, despite personal danger in doing so. Now, there's, probably not a lot of personal danger, but when you were a Scientologist, you had to somehow show that. So people would come up with these creative ways of overthinking how there could be personal danger in buying locks for people. Because if there's not this personal danger, is it really an effective blow? And so you make your effective blow, right? You do something against this group that you have been pretending to be a part of. The next thing you need to do is you need to make up the damage that you've done to your group by not locking the door. That's far greater than what's already asked of every group member. So you have to make up the damage of what you have done far greater than what is asked of a typical group member, because already in Scientology, when you are, and again, I'm really talking about parishioners who practice Scientology, go to the church. I'm not even talking, this all applies to too with Sea Org staff, but this is something that's more unique to the everyday Scientologist, and also applies to Sea Org members and staff members. But I'm more looking at it from there. So to make up the damage, I mean, I don't know how you would do that. You would come out with some way. Maybe you would put a better lock on the door than was there before. And you also got better locks for every place in your house, or maybe at someone else's house, or maybe you got new locks for the organization. Whatever it is that you have to do, you have to make up the damage that you've done. Now, I think amends as a general concept is a good thing. I always tried to tell my kids when they were growing up, hey, if you pull some crap and I find out about it without you telling me, the consequence for that is going to be much more. But if you come to me and you say, hey, here's what happened. Actually, I need you to preface it. What would I preface? I told them there was almost like a safe word where if they told me this, then I knew that I needed to get in a mindset where I wasn't just going to react and go off, because they needed a safe space to tell me what they needed to tell me. And if I was not ready to receive it, if I was going to respond with, anger and flipping out, then it's not safe for them to tell me. And I forget what it was. Maybe it was I think it was as simple as because I told them, you have to tell me, I need to tell you something. And if my kids are around, somebody tell me in the chat. Otherwise, I'll ask them later. But I'm pretty sure that's what it was. And then I would know, oh, okay, I need to I need to have an open mind about this. And I need to listen and not just, being thinking of how much I'm going to ground them or going right into fear about whatever it is. So, but in Scientology, well, my point with my kids is part of that consequence might be, okay, and I would usually ask them, so what do you think the consequence should be? And I got to tell you, almost always, they either pick something that was pretty spot on to what I thought too, or it was even too much. I always thought that was interesting. And, we'd kind of negotiate it. Sometimes we had to negotiate it because sometimes it was under 2. I'd be like, okay, well, what do you think is a good consequence for that to, maybe just give you some encouragement to not let that happen again. And they would tell me, and sometimes it was a negotiation. They'd be like, no phone for 3 days. I'd be like, 4. And they'd be like, okay, no phone 4 days, but I get to use the landline, when they had a cell phone, which was much later. Right. You see what I'm talking about. You can have different in Scientology, you have to actually make up this damage far beyond what a normal group member already has to do. And of course, they had to throw that in there because a regular group member is expected to do so much. Give all of your time, all of your money, all of your resources, all of your children. What can you do that's above and beyond that already? So I always thought it was interesting that L. Ron Hubbard added that in, far greater than what's being asked of you. Now, when you've done all of this, you've decided who your friends are, you have delivered an effective blow to the enemies of the group that you have been pretending to be a part of, despite any personal danger. You've made up the damage that you've done far beyond what is normally expected of a Scientologist. The very last thing you need to do is put all of this in writing, written down or type it. And then on a piece of paper, you're going to write approved on one side, and on the other side of the paper, you're going to write disapproved, and you're going to draw a line down the middle. And then you're going to take this document to everybody in your group. Now, maybe your group is just everyone in the course room in the evenings, right? You don't have to literally go to every Scientologist. Even they're not that crazy. So sometimes that group can be small, but sometimes your organization could be 100 people. You have to take this document now, every step written out, how you did each step, how you made up the damage, and you have to give it to people and stand there like a douche, and they approve it or disapprove it. It was like approved, disapproved, or approved, denied, but you're basically asking to come back into the group, and you're only accepted back into the group if you can get the majority of the members of your group to approve that you have completed this formula for this condition they refer to as liability. You can then get out of that. I mean, for those of you who have not heard this, I need to know what you think about that and how you see that. And definitely, if you can put it in the comments, especially, after in the live, but if you're not in the live, please do. I really want to know. I know how I see it now, but I don't have the same point of view. It's all I ever knew. I want to know who people who did not know this about Scientology, or maybe you did, and how you see it when you found that out, that this is something Scientologists do to get back into the good graces. And I have read liability formulas, as they're called, when you walk around with these things, for some really, really personal things that you had to put on there. I cheated on my spouse, or I masturbated when I was supposed to be on course. I mean, just crazy. And some of these people you don't even know. These are strangers. So when you wonder why sometimes Scientologists leaving Scientology, ex-Scientologists lack boundaries, this is partly why. We were not only forced to confess to our Scientology auditor, our superiors, our ethics officer, but to each other when we did things that violated, the mores or the rules of the group. And if they saw us to be in one of these conditions, such as this one we're talking about, which is liability. So it's difficult, especially in my opinion, if you grew up in Scientology and this is how your parents also raised you, this is what they did, is, it would kind of run you through this formula. You grow up that's your tool. That's your tool that you use. And so sometimes, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, I would do something, whether it was making a mistake or realizing like, oh my gosh, I didn't take care of that, or whatever it was that I felt I needed to come clean about. I way overdid it. I way over explained myself, way over. And it's something sometimes that I'll still catch myself doing in a situation and then be like, oh, wait, I did not need to tell them all of these things, especially if they were of a personal nature. Although this is different on YouTube because I'm sharing my story. But if I'm being honest and we were just sitting at a table and it was just you and me, I would be doing the same thing. But my hope is it brings again some understanding to that mindset of this oversharing or a lack of boundary sometimes, because it's not just the constantly having to confess in Scientology sessions, it's actually to everyone. Can you imagine having to go to 50, 60, 80 people with what you did to make up the damage, all this, and then have them sign it? And as the person sometimes signing it, I would say, yeah, every single time I felt uncomfortable, which is saying a lot because there's not much that makes me feel uncomfortable. And that made me uncomfortable because I just felt, and it was something that I tried to push away because what I realized that uncomfortableness was, I didn't realize it then, but I understand it more now. What that uncomfortableness was empathy. Empathy would creep in. And so I'd feel uncomfortable because my heart was going out to this person that they're having to walk around with 4 pages of how their marriage blew up, what they did, and how they made up the damage, and all these things and other things, some of them very, very personal. It kind of like, I think that when you tie all these together, it explains certain behaviors and adds to this idea of why Tom Cruise, and not all, but many Scientologists, it's common to think that you're better than everybody else. It's constantly being reinforced within Scientology. And if, God forbid, you get out of line by just a little bit, the reaction to that and what is asked of you, because there's no grace, there's no forgiveness, there's none of that. But you need to do these complicated steps that are completely way over the top. And then you need to ask permission. And even when it's given, if you're somebody who's kind of a bit of a like a real butthole, you might kind of maybe even get off on people coming and asking your permission. So, may I please enter the group again? I think that there are people who that does not make them uncomfortable. Maybe they had to do a liability formula and now it was like payback in their mind. I don't know. I just know that it made me uncomfortable. And I've since understood that feeling of being uncomfortable was empathy. And so we were indoctrinated to push that down because you shouldn't be feeling sorry for this person because what they did was so egregious. And sometimes it was, most of the time it was not. It wasn't. But because Scientology, I mean, look at the Sea organization in Scientology, they call themselves the most ethical group on the planet. That's saying a lot. And I know I'm being very literal about that, but they mean it. They are the most ethical people in the world. I'm sure Tom Cruise has said it a ton. And that is why it is difficult. I think it goes back to them, how it's difficult to leave and why they react the way, or more often don't react the way that you would think that they would. And this idea of, well, I'm better than these people because I know better than them. I know better than them. That's why I'm better than them. And that's the attitude that often comes across. And I think we see that with Tom Cruise. I'm going to see if there's any questions here. I was trying not to look at the chat because I didn't want to lose my train of thought and take forever. So just bear with me. Bear with me. Oh, I love a lot of these comments, though. It's a privilege to be a human being, not a Thetan. Oh my gosh, that's a good one. And yeah, pause for Andrea. That medal ceremony was beyond cringy. It really was. It was, like I said, I watched it as a very active Scientologist, and I was still a little like, what? And to be honest, what was more cringe for me as a Scientologist was, one, the saluting each other. I'm like, did we start doing this with public and, just we're all going to salute each other now? But when it was just, whatever he was called, like the most dedicated Scientologist, It was just too much. Oh, okay, Dog's Rule. Is that what is happening with my clicker? When you go through and read comments, please let us know who did your painting behind you. It's beautiful. I need to remember her last name. She's an artist in Hawaii, and this is one of her originals, but I have multiple. Oh, it was so beautiful. I will find out and then put it in the description for this video. I'm totally having a brain fart on it. But and I've gone and I've seen her like 3 times. Each time I've gone back to the Big Island because she's often at the Waimea Farmers Market, if you ever get to go, which is on Wednesdays and Saturdays. That's where I met her, so I would always go back and look for her and try and get more pieces by her because she's so talented and she's a local Hawaiian artist. So I'll put it in the show description. Tony got that for me. That was a gift that he had gotten for me. I had only gotten reproductions. She would do these amazing reproductions onto fabric and frame them. And that's what's in my living room. And she did an entire series. I'll try to share a photos of them in the community, post a photo. Of all these different body types of Polynesian dancers, but they're all faceless, and they all have these different body types. And she calls the series Reflections. And she told me, she said, I want any woman to look at any of these pieces and connect with one and not feel that any one is wrong or that they can't relate to. I want women to be able to find themselves in my art. And I was like, take my money. Take my money. And every time I go find her, and that's why I'm like totally brain farting on the name, but that's me. I will do that. I will. The hard drive is getting full in the 50s here. And if I take on too much new information, old information disappears. It's like getting unsubscribed from YouTube. Okay. What was I doing? I was looking at questions to see. Gosh, you guys crack me up so bad. Laura says, I feel sorry for Travolta. I think they have him so manipulated. He could not leave. He could never survive the aftermath. Yeah, I want to believe the rumor that he's leaving. I think it would be so good for him. I would like him to experience some freedom from all of that. He's getting older too. And I think that's often a motivator is how you know that your life is getting shorter. And, maybe he's like, fine, I'm just coming back. But even if you believe that, you still don't want to necessarily waste the one that you have. As a never in, it's so interesting to me how Scientology is complete and utter narcissistic programming. It really does seem that way, or a lot of it. Completely obliterating personal boundaries, even not being able to lock a door. Yes. And you start taking things next level when somebody breaks a rule, then you just like lose your crap about it. Like you're just over the top about it. And there's this overreaction to it because you've been so indoctrinated to believe this fostering of perfection, which is such a lie. That is exactly what they want you to be, perfect robots. And I won't get too much into that. I got to remember that's a great video because there's so much background and things I can share with you about the whole roboticness of Scientologists. I need to remember that. Scientologists, why you need to be perfect robots. But yes, you're totally seeing it exactly how it is. It's very narcissistic. Sue, maybe I gotta double click it. Maybe that's why I'm like, click, it's not working. Click, it's not working. I get frustrated. Click, click, it's working. Oh, I should not be left alone sometimes. Okay, Sue, I really love how this chat doesn't blow up like others. Oh, it means we're listening and are engrossed in what Natalie's talking about. Thank you. That's really sweet. I appreciate that. I get so sometimes distracted into the chat because even what you guys are talking about, if it's not what I'm talking about, I still find it interesting. And I try not to get too thrown off. Nope, even the double click is not, maybe it's something is going on here. All right, Kelly. Would you be shifting the blame outside of the group to a non-Scientologist? Um, you might. So like your effective blow might be to that non-Scientologist, to whoever you're shifting the blame to. You wouldn't shift the blame in terms of going to the group and saying, well, this idiot over here did it. If you're being assigned the condition of liability, then it's something that you were responsible for, or there's an expectation that you are responsible for it. Because in Scientology, it's also very common for them to think you are responsible for so much more than we are, which then, well, surely if I'm responsible for the salvation of mankind, then surely I should be able to do whatever it takes to save all of mankind. It's just like you just go down the toilet drain about the whole thing. So, but they wouldn't go to the group and be like, that guy, this guy over here who's a non-Scientologist, he did it. No, you still have to take that responsibility for it if it's something that you were over or in charge of. But when you're making your amends or that effective blow, then you can throw him under the bus. This guy, he sold me a faulty lock. So I went and I reported his business to the Better Business Bureau. And that's personal. It was risky because blah, 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 blah. But hopefully that answers your question, Kelly. That's kind of how it goes. Oh, so I've seen that Relatable Reese still has many of her Church of Scientology books. She shows them sometimes when she streams with Aaron. Yeah, you're right. You're right. At least I knew she had an ethics book, but I got to remember that too. If I really get desperate, maybe there's something that I could ask her to look up in one of her books. I got rid of all mine. Oh, and Rinder has them too. Okay. See, there's got to be people for me. You know what? I left them actually with, I wonder what my ex-husband did with them. I'm going to ask him. I am definitely going to ask them. Thank you so much, Samir. Yeah, pure craziness. Absolutely. I'm so glad that some of you that did not catch a live before were able to do that. Yeah, and Trudy, I mean, you make a good point. I'm a never in and I'm a total oversharer. I've experienced that too with people who are never in Scientology, and it fascinates me because in my head I'm going, oh my God, they're totally oversharing. I am completely here for it. But why are they doing this? I think it's great because it's something I can completely relate to. But why? Because what was their Scientology? And I think often it's just there's something, wasn't Scientology, but there is something. And I don't know a lot of the psychology behind it, so I'm not going to speak too much to it, but I know somebody in the chat knows. But I do remember gaining an understanding about that it is not uncommon as well, a lot of this outside Scientology. But in Scientology, it continues to be fostered for years and years and over and over and over and over again. Okay. Free zone bone phone. I have noticed that in some ways, ex-Scientologists are generally more polite and conscientious than most other people. No group is better at responding to emails, in my opinion. Is that a Scientology thing? That is an awesome question. Oh my gosh, I laugh so hard. That is a really good question. And it's good to hear. I'm glad. You hope that because in Scientology, many of us were such assholes to each other and even other people, some more than others. And yes. Okay, so but I have an interesting thought on the emails thing. In Scientology, if you're a staff member or in the C organization, and this is something that I think public picked up as well. I can't recall exactly if L. Ron Hubbard, I'm sure he did, say to do this, and it's why they all do it. You have to handle your communication within 24 hours. So if it was a letter, if it was, I guess for now that it would be email. That wasn't something as common when I was there because it was way back in the when. Or if it's, just written communication, they did telexes then. You or somebody, left you a message on your desk or put a communication in your little box and you went and got it and like you got to answer up in 24 hours. I I think that's a habit. Um, I don't think that it's the worst habit either. But aside from the fact that for me, I sometimes put unnecessary pressure on myself to just handle all these different communication. And I'm not talking about like in the comments or even when you guys email me because I'm here for it. That's like super enjoyable for me in more of a work setting, right? And you want to handle things promptly, especially in the day of email and all that. But there is this added pressure about responding to communication. And so I think you might be onto something. I think that's well within reason. That's a really good question. Lovett says all of these policies, especially all together, are a mental prison. Yes. It's amazing that anyone can unravel it once it's in place. Yes, I know. I can tell you when I was wanting to leave Scientology and even when I left, and there were things about myself that I just did not like. And I was worried that the things that I really disliked about myself were me and not something that was an influence of Scientology. And it took me a while as I sorted those things out that the vast majority of the things that the things I had really big problems with, I don't mean like tiny little, like whatever things. We all have things that we don't like about ourselves. I mean, what I was seeing as major personality flaws was I could tie that back to my upbringing and the indoctrination that I saw the world through. And the more I stripped that away, the more that's when I realized, oh, wait a minute, I do have empathy. I do have compassion. It's just been covered up and it's just a tiny, tiny, tiny little sprout because it was never watered. It was never nurtured. It wasn't given what it needed to grow and take over. But the other part of me that was more conducive for being a Sea Organization member and a hardcore Scientologist by a lot of, when I look back, I'm like, I was like the laziest, but by regular standards, very effective, very efficient. But by Sea Organization standards, no, I was lazy as hell. That totally makes sense to me. So this is why I just love when you guys jump in with your stuff because I'm like, yes, that makes so much sense. Mean Streets. Do ex-Scientologists go through deprogramming? I don't know if there's an official, like you can go here and go through deprogramming, if you mean in that way, because I do know, at least I know there used to be, because people would get their family out of Scientology and then work with what was referred to as a deprogrammer. I've not heard of that in recent times, so I don't know if it's still a thing. I believe that we do go through a natural deprogramming if you want to. Because again, if you don't have a problem with the way that you're showing up or behaving or acting, then why would that need to change, right? Maybe it's like this awakening of, whoa, I didn't even realize I was doing that. Like me being condescending in emails. Hand to God, didn't know, wasn't even sitting there thinking I was trying to be condescending. The opposite. I thought I was just being factual. That's why too in my text now, I will try to emoji the crap out of stuff because I don't want to, want to make sure, hey, I feel good about this. Not, it just was interesting to me that it would be taken that way. And that was something that was more trained into me in the Sea Organization and Scientology. There's not as many niceties, especially on staff, dramatically in the Sea Organization. So you were just as direct as possible because you need to be as effective as possible. If I have to take 5 minutes of how are you? Oh, and how are you? And da 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 before we can get down to what we need to talk about, that was considered to be a complete and utter waste of time. So part of that deprogramming for me was even realizing like I did not need to be so down to business. And sometimes I'll still find it a little, depends on what it is. If I have a bunch of things I have to do, and maybe this is you guys too, maybe it's not just a cult thing where I have to remember that I need to still be polite, even if I've got these things to do. And it's also okay at some point, if it's going on too long, to say, oh, I need to get going. Because God knows I just ramble on and can talk on and on. Those are the kind of things that I experienced as what I would consider a lot of my deprogramming is recognizing and learning. And honestly, by other people, when I would meet people who were so kind, and I've talked a lot about with you guys, the compassion and the empathy that so much of you have and show. When I would experience that, when I left Scientology, it just opened my eyes so much more that, wow, that's a great way to be. And I realized that that felt more natural to me. That felt more like, oh, okay, I do like people. Because when I was in Scientology, I thought I hated people, that I didn't like people. And that was just not true, not true at all. I didn't like the people I was with. That was what the thing was. Favorite Aunt Deedly. Were liability formulas ordered or were they always self-inflicted? After going through that the first time, why would anyone confess another sin? Uh, they can be self-inflicted, but the vast majority of the time they are ordered, or it's an automatic, if you do this, you're going to be in a condition of liability and that will be assigned to you. So the vast majority of the time, it's being assigned to you. But it can also be in Scientology, a tool you decide for yourself that, oh, I'm in this situation here. Here's what I can use to get out of it. If you believe that's what happened. In Scientology, it's the idea of, L. Ron Hubbard talks about how, like, why would somebody ever confess or come clean about stuff again? There is this, if you are an active Scientologist, you are constantly being put on an e-meter and you fully believe that it indicates what you are thinking. It doesn't say what you are thinking, but you are trained to believe and understand that the needle on the meter, because you're holding the metal cans, back in the day, soup cans, then they got fancy and started making their own. So they got their cans. Oh, and they come in different sizes. I don't know if you guys knew that. I think when you buy the e-meter, yes, when you buy the e-meter, the cans come in all these different sizes because they have to properly fit into your hands. So you're holding onto the cans, the auditor, the person using the e-meter, and if you're on the upper levels, you are doing this to yourself. So you're looking at the e-meter and you are trained that when the needle does certain things on the dial, it means certain things. And those certain things are, the answer is yes. And sometimes it's no, but it's not it's kind of, that's why it gets compared to a lie detector a lot, but it's a little bit more than that, or at least what we're led to believe that it is. And based on the reaction of the needle, that's helping you give insight into whether this guy is like lying to you, or whether they really are feeling really good and you can stop doing whatever process it is that you're doing. And so because of that, Scientologists really believe that it's good, they're going to be found out, or someone's going to rat them out. The next time they're on the e-meter, that it's going to come out that way. And you are less, well, I don't know if that's the reality, that you're less punished if you come clean yourself. But that's the belief. And in some cases, I think in my experience, I had that happen. And that's what I did with my kids, not on an e-meter, but just, hey, give me a heads up from you and let's figure it out together. But if I find out after the fact through the police, then we're going to have a problem even more. So yes, hopefully that answers that question. So you're gonna come clean about it next time because you don't want to get in trouble. And they're going to find out, and it's going to cost you money, because if this comes out, if you're sitting in a Scientology auditing session and the question is, did you what was one I heard? It was, did you have money that you could donate, but you didn't? And this is some of the security questions that public, everyday parishioners were being asked. And during a session they were paying money for. So you got to remember, Scientologists pay money for these interrogations because it's what's going to allow you, you're going to earn the right to be a Scientologist through confessing the dipshit stuff that you're doing in their eyes, these horrific things you're doing in their eyes. So much of the time, anybody outside of Scientology would be like, what'd you do? And you're like, oh, I did this. And they're like, and case in point, I did not know. I have been primarily self-employed since I got out of Scientology. And I was working on a project, and I went to work for a woman who I still work with now. And I didn't know that people that, like, it never occurred to me to make personal calls or take care of anything personal during work hours. I thought, well, one, it's like I'm busy. I have so much to do. And there was something really important that I had to take care of, and I kept not getting to it. And Tony's like, well, why don't you go in early before you're supposed to be at work anyways? Why don't you just do it then? I was like, oh, I can't do that on company time. And he's like, and on top of it, you're salaried, like you're working at home, and I was like, oh my gosh, do people really do that? And it was like, yes, they do. Not that I'm doing it all the time, but I'm getting more okay with, like, understanding that and not being such a freak about it. Hey, Karen, the more I hear, thank you for the super chat. Well, you know what? It's my first one because I thought I'd gotten one on a live I did with Aaron, but I didn't know you had to click this button. It was a whole thing. Oh, I'm so excited. Thank you. The more I hear about Scientology, the more I won't watch anything on TV or movies that have actors involved with Scientology. I get that. Put your money where you want to. I haven't seen any John Travolta movies that I really like. So even if he's in a movie, I wouldn't not watch it because he's a Scientologist. Plus, he's like Scientology light and maybe leaving. I don't want to hate on him, but it just depends on the movie. I guess and you'll, if you have not figured this out yet, Tom Cruise really annoys me. And that is why I pick on him. So much just because of the things that he has been involved with and done. But I don't think it would stop me from paying for a movie that he was in, but I'll watch it. So like when the new Mission Impossible is no longer on pay-per-view, I might watch it. But I don't seek it out. Some of his movies, it's like seen one, seen them all. He kind of plays the same character a lot anyways. But thank you so much, Karen. All right, let's see. I'm catching up. Veronica, people are people in or out of Scientology. Scientologists may be more disciplined because there's no other choice. Veronica, see, you just summed it up there perfectly. That is exactly it. It's at a next level. And honestly, this is why I think so many of you who've never been in Scientology resonate with a lot of these stories and the things that people coming out of Scientology and healing from the experience, because you do too, just in other ways. It's just many of these things in Scientology are taken to such an extreme. That's what makes it a cult. It is so extreme. You take something that should be kind of simple and you complicate it and you make it so completely extreme that it's crazy. Cece says, someday I'd love to hear how you remember me. Oh, I can tell you. I don't remember much about those years, but I know I treated others as I would like to be. Memories are coming back as the trauma wears off. Cece, that is awesome. And I remember you as being a beautiful person. You were married to Jack. So, and I think, right? Tell me if I'm wrong. And maybe I totally have the wrong Cece. Because if we're friends on Facebook and you do a lot of camping, I think I'm thinking of the same person. And If not, then we still need to chat CC in, because maybe you're not this person that I think you are. But who I'm thinking of was married to someone who was in my organization. And I just remember just her, just like having a warm smile, which is not something that you saw a lot. And that was something that I always thought, wow, it's nice to see somebody smile in Scientology and in this organization. Oh, hey from Nova Scotia. And thank you for the welcome to the SPTV community. I am really enjoying myself. Oh, good. So it is you. Okay. Yes, Jack, you guys were married for 25 years. Okay. Two things. One, I've been following you on Facebook with the camping and things. Tony and I got a travel trailer last year, and I'm dying to like geek out about it with people. If anybody ever wants to talk about that, even in the comments, or do a video about it, I'm obsessed. I love it. I went down the rabbit hole on camping and all these things, but regular non-glamping camping is just physically, it's not in the cards. I need more of a relaxing experience. And even with the travel trailer, it feels like a lot. Um, but yes, we should chat, because yeah, I do remember I remember you fondly. But I don't think we knew each other well. And I was a kid then. I was only, let's see, probably maybe 17 or so, 16, 17, 18. Sick lid. I like that. And thank you for the super chat. I just went to an Amish market. Their food is great, but it's very strange watching them dressed in clothes from 200 years ago. Yes, it's like taking a step back in time. Here in the Midwest, especially in Wisconsin, there is a humongous Amish population, and there's a lot in Minnesota as well. So it's not uncommon to want to go grab a bed and breakfast and go shopping in the Amish communities. In fact, I'll tell you a quick story. Tony and I and his boys went and rented a vacation rental that was in an Amish community, but not by obviously, because there was electricity and stuff, not by an Amish family, but it was really near, right in the Amish community. And that was part of why we wanted to do it, because I thought it would be really cool to see Amish people doing their thing, and to go to the stores where a lot of the furniture and the different things that they make and the goods and the crafts. I've been an admirer of a lot of their work when I've seen it, and jams and jellies and anyway, so we had this whole weekend, and it was winter time. I remember it being cold. And the person who we rented the house from through the short-term vacation rental, had told us, "Hey, I talked to my friends down the road. They're an Amish family, and they said that if you want to milk the cows and goats with them, just show up at 5." And we thought, "Oh, heck yeah, I am all here for that. Bring on the cows, bring on the goats. Let's get to milking." And we thought, this is great. Tony's boys were a lot younger then, so they thought it was super cool too. So we get all bundled up, because it's getting towards dark, and we're going to head over there at 5 and there's no way to call them. We're just going to go and we're going to show up. So we get into the car, we drive over there, we pull down, we're looking in, there's, not a lot of light. It's dark, because it was getting dark by then. And you would see the kind of lights that they would use, that's the non-electric lights. And we're going down, and there's these two dudes by the driveway kind of looking at us, and we're like, "Oh, we're just kind of just trying to wave and be friendly." We go all the way down the driveway to what looks like a barn. And I get out of the car, and these people are looking at us like we're just these aliens. And I thought maybe we had the wrong house. And so I'm like, "Hey, I'm so-and-so, and we're renting from so-and-so." And he said he had made arrangements for us to come at 5, and we could do these farm chores with you. And the guy goes, 5 a.m. We showed up at 5 p.m. And even though I thought it would be a cool experience, there's no way I was going to get up that early and get myself together and go over there and do that at 5 a.m. So, what's funny is I would do it now. I would do it now. But at that time, I was not having it. I don't even know how I got on that topic. I'm sorry. Karen, thank you. It's not their belief, it's the abuse that they condone and ignore. I won't support them. Yeah, you know what? That's a good point. That is a good point. You make a really good point, Karen. Um, I guess, yeah. I'm not totally there yet, but I can really see it, and that makes a lot of sense. The more and more things go on, like I said, I didn't even know I was in a human trafficking cult until probably a couple years ago, because some of these things I still hadn't separated out as, you know, things that were really not okay. Um, and I'm still finding that, what is really not okay and what can be really not okay, but still be okay here. I think we're all figuring it out, but you make a good point, and I really appreciate that and that you shared that. All right. Oh, this is interesting, Maria. As a child raised in the Roman Catholic Church, my confession was always the same. I swore I lied. I didn't listen to my parents. Yeah, and then at least you just had to do Hail Marys and thing and not like go around with, 4 pages of here's what I did, here's how I delivered an effective blow. Oh, and you love camping. That's awesome. Me too. Me too. 5 a.m. That's when the Farmers News Network starts. Spike. Maybe it does. I don't know. I'm not as familiar. Um, Probably. Which is still, I can't believe we did that. Uh, what does this say, Jess? Cults to Consciousness did a few great episodes with former Amish folks. Oh, it opened my eyes. I would totally watch that. I did see a documentary once where about their, what do they call it? Rumspringer, where at a certain age, I forget if you're 16, 18, as an Amish person, you get to like take off for 2 years and go sow your oats, and then you make the conscious decision to return. Now, I don't remember if, I think pressure was put on them because I think that your family would shun you if you didn't go back. So don't like that part of it. But I thought it was interesting that they let them go. See, even the Amish people let them go. In Scientology, that just does not happen. Sienna, and hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, can't stand camping too far away from the toilet. That's why I got a travel trailer, because there's a toilet and there is a shower in it. Now, another reminder, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you're liking the video, like it. I appreciate all of you. Mahalo for being here. I'm going to wrap it up and get going, but Mele Kalikimaka, which is Merry Christmas in Hawaiian, if you did not know. If you're catching this on the replay or overnight, share in the comments your thoughts. Answer the same questions and things that we were talking about, because I love jumping into the comments too in the morning while I'm laying in bed, waiting for Tony to wake up, nudging him, trying to not be too aggressive about it, but wake up. I love that. So I do read them. So definitely do that. And I appreciate all of you. I do believe I'm going to do a live tomorrow, because we're not doing anything till later in the day. Maybe you'll catch it. If not, you can catch it on the replay. But again, appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. And I will hopefully talk to you tomorrow.